Cherish is a word I use to describe all the feeling that I have hiding here for you inside. You don't know how many times I've wished that I had told you. You don't know how many times I've wished that I could hold you.
Well, that sappy song came out in 1966 by a band called The Association, and yes, it was called Cherish. Well, here is a crazy thought, I think an obvious thought, but still a crazy thought that I want you to consider. What if positive feelings that you have for your wife, what if they can be a powerful motivator to move you away from your active porn use? Today I want to explore what may seem to be a simple idea, but I think can make a profound difference to your marriage as well as your recovery from embedded porn habits. Welcome aboard.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, as we get midway through May in 2025, let me just say we are in the process of starting a brand new Finding Traction group. That group is a 52-week video series. We collect 5, 6, 7, 8 guys together, and we journey together. I lead the group, and we journey through the 52-week, 1 year course that moves you away from embedded porn use. Our brand new group is starting on Thursdays, and it meets at 4:30 p.m. Pacific all the way through till 7:30 p.m. Eastern. They're 1-hour groups, so 4:30 Pacific is 7:30 Eastern. It's also 9:30 Friday morning in Australia. So if you are looking and interested and know that, you know what, it's time for me to take that step, what I'm doing and trying on my own is not working, I really need to find some rocket fuel, I encourage you to reach out to me and say, Vern, how would I join a group? And again, I'd love you to be a part of that. So reach out to me. Reach out to me as soon as possible, because we're going to hold that group open for a few weeks, and then we'll close it in terms of having a connected, committed group of guys. Let me also say and remind you of the Circle Learning platform. That is a platform that you can get a whole bunch of free recovery resources and documents. And there you can see all the podcasts, but also you can get piles of other information as well. It also will be helpful for today's lesson or today's podcast, because I'm going to reference a document today that is on the Circle Learning platform. And you can download that under the free resources app. So another good reason to get on the Circle Learning platform. If you want to reach out to me, I'd love to connect with guys, or, even sit down with me for a free Zoom call just to share a little bit more about your story and meet me. Once again, my email is bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Well, let's get back to this idea. And last week I shared with you what was a pretty heavy podcast called Is Your Door Closing? And it really was something to hopefully wake you up as to the possible negative effects of not dealing with your embedded porn use. Simply thinking, you know what, I can continue down this road and it's not going to have long-term effects. And this idea of your big why. I picked up this concept from Matt Dobschutz from Porn Free Radio, and your big why often has two sides to it. One of those is looking at the negative or potential negative consequences of your continued behavior down this road. And that podcast simply said, I want to avoid not just the negative effects that I'm experiencing on my mental health, maybe my spiritual journey, but I also want to avoid the negative effects it's having on my marriage relationship. And someone might say, well, that's kind of a fear motive. Is that a good motivation? Well, I think fear is one thing that does and can motivate us. For example, I don't look at my phone when I'm driving as much as possible, because up here in British Columbia, that results in a $368 fine and 4 points towards and against your license. Now, I've got too many points on my license already. That's another story. But you know what? That really keeps me from, when that phone goes off, keeps me from picking it up and looking at it while I'm driving. So that is a legitimate motive that tailors and changes my behavior. Now, I think it is a good idea to say, okay, fear or negative consequences can be legitimate. For example, like last week, we spoke on the consequences around and in our marriage. But I think a deeper and more long-lasting big why is based on positive motivations. This is what I want from my life. This is the man I want to be. And in today's lesson, this motive, because I love my wife, this porn behavior is not consistent or in keeping with the love I have for her. Now, if that sounds a little hard for you to access, let me ask you this question. Think about back to those earliest days when you started going out with your now wife. Did that make any difference on your porn acting out behaviors? Some of you might say, no, it didn't make any difference at all. But others of you might say, yeah, it did make a real difference. And for me, in that earliest infatuation stage, let me just say that powered in me a whole new set of motivations around porn behaviors. Because I was so in love with my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, I didn't want to do anything that would hurt her or, would cause a rift or tension or would take me out of that sense of relationship. Now, you might say, well, that's, sounds almost Disney-esque, but that changes, doesn't it, Vern? I mean, for me, for example, in 2 days will celebrate my 39th wedding anniversary. And I want to ask you this question. Is there a way that you can renew that motivating sense of love that motivated and propelled you in those early days? For those of you who can think back and access that, whether you've been married 9 years or 19 or 29, or in my case, 39. Well, recently I read a great book that I think every married guy should read. In fact, every person in a relationship should read. The book is called Cherish, and the author is Gary Thomas. And I think if these principles were practiced in a relationship, it would be a game changer. Now, let's talk briefly about that word cherish. You probably haven't used it at all this week. But if you think back, some of you think way back to your wedding day, you will probably or hopefully remember something about that part of your wedding ceremony that said to love, honor, and what? Cherish. Remember that? Some of you may need to go back and watch your wedding video. I'm sure your wife has it around. there was that phrase, to love, honor, and cherish till death do us part. Now we'll leave honor out for a sec, but let's just talk about love and cherish. Notice the word love and cherish are used separately and distinctly. Now, most of us are familiar with the word love. It's probably the most overused word. It means to commit to another, to live towards the other in an unselfish way. Well, love is love. It's thousands of songs have been written about it. But cherish is different. Let me make a distinction this way. Love is a commitment word, but cherish is a tasting word. To cherish somebody is to delight in the other person. To delight in all of them, not just to love them, but like them, enjoy them at the deepest level. Cherish conveys far more than a commitment or a choice. It's more about a sense of delight. It's the cherry on top of the sundae. To cherish a person is to be captivated by them in the fullest sense. I mean, this sounds, almost like you could break out in a song, right? And in this book, Cherish, by Gary Thomas, he gets into all sorts of ways to practice cherishing our wives. Here are some of the quotes from the book. Quote, "To cherish something is to hold it dear. You go out of your way to show that they are important to you. To cherish someone is to protect them." Let me just say, for example, let's say you saved up and you had a dream car that you had spent 5-10 years saving for. There's all sorts of, if you've ever been to a classic car show, you see people. This car is something that they cherish. I guarantee you when those people park their car in a parking lot, they're even thinking about where they're parking it so that the car is not even dinged. They probably have a cover for it. It's probably in a garage. It's probably out of the weather. Why? Because they cherish their car. Here's a couple other quotes. To cherish someone is to treat them with tenderness. You look for ways to nurture them, even indulge them. To cherish is to go out of our way to appreciate and notice someone. Here's a challenging one in our area. To cherish my wife is to let her define beauty for me, to let her be the standard of what I find most attractive for me, whether she's 23, 43, 63. Gulp. It is, going on. It is if she is the only woman in the world to me. To cherish is to conserve and steward my sexual desire for my wife. Double gulp. And so these are just some of the ways that, and some of the quotes that he says. Let me give you a couple other things that he talks about, practical ways. To cherish your wife is to be a student of your wife, to show curiosity and ask questions. Another one, to cherish someone is to work with their uniqueness, not who you think they should be. To cherish somebody is to work on your obvious flaws and accept your wife's flaws. There's all sorts of examples. And he has chapter after chapter around ways that you can cherish the other. Maybe it would be helpful to talk about some of the things that fall short of cherishing, or even things that we do that act in the opposite spirit of cherishing. Now, if you go to the diagram that I mentioned is on the Circle Learning platform, you will see a document that you can download, which essentially shows a continuum of a relationship on a line. Now, let me describe it for you. So if you don't have it in front of you, or you're driving, which means you're not looking at your phone, or you're even out for a walk. So what you have is you have a horizontal line, and you're going to have 4 words that all start with the letter C, which is, of course, important for a communicator. So on the far left word, you have the word cherish, which we've begun to define. Now, as we move towards the right on this line, this is not where you want to go. So this is basically moving to the right, is moving off that ideal, the far left, of cherishing. So let's move to the next word on the right, and that word is comparison. You see, comparison takes us out of the cherishing category and moves us in the wrong direction. So comparison, for example, is when we begin to compare our wife to other wives or old partners. Perhaps we compare our present partner to somebody else who maybe our partner is weak in an area, and we compare them to another woman who is strong in an area. Or maybe we compare our wife with an ideal that we've made up in our mind. Phil Vischer from VeggieTales, he has this great line. He says, "For the first few months of my marriage, I noticed all these things that I liked about my wife. But then for the next 6 months, I noticed all the things that I didn't like about my wife." You know, those are examples. Any sort of comparison moves us off cherishing. Of course, our porn behaviors are rocket fuel to negative comparisons, aren't they? This is a quote from Gary Thomas in his book. "One of the problems with porn is that it neurologically trains us to find our wives less beautiful," which is, and let me add, which is why studies after studies show a strong correlation between porn use and dissatisfaction with our partners. And you wondered why your wife wasn't so keen on it. Because they instinctively know that. It's not about you. Yes, but it fuels your dissatisfaction in me. They know that. So let's go back. On this line, we have, on the far left, we have cherish, which is the ideal. And the next word to the right is comparison. As we move further to the right, we now have the word criticism. And this is where we subtly or not so subtly help our wives get with the program. When we criticize them, what we're attempting to do is to change them, to get them to move closer to what we want, to our ideal. I don't know if this is true, but I heard a funny quote once that said, "A man marries a woman thinking she won't change, and she does. A woman marries a man thinking he will change, and he doesn't." But you see, every woman and every man have strengths and weaknesses. And oftentimes, many of those strengths and weaknesses are just two sides of the same coin. Let me put it this way. For example, let's say your wife is a go-getter. She's type A. She's driven. Well, she's going to be amazing for getting things done, for you guys pursuing your goals, for your kids, for moving forward. But that same wife probably has a hard time relaxing or struggles with self-care. That just kind of goes with that territory. But that's the woman you married. Or let's say that your wife is an artist and highly relational. Well, oftentimes, women like that or people like that, they maybe struggle in the organizational or punctual department. So the bottom line is, when you criticize somebody, you are trying to get them to change to what you want them to be, instead of accepting your partner with warts and all. The interesting thing is, criticism used as a tool actually disables your partner. It actually makes them less likely to move towards what you want. The irony is, actually, through cherishing and accepting your partner motivates them to want to grow and change. So, let's go back to our now 3 words. We have cherish, we have comparison, and the next word to the right is criticism. Now, the last and farthest and most destructive word on the right is the word contempt. Contempt is about your feelings of superiority towards your wife. And, you are superior. You are a better Christian, a lover, a parent, a housekeeper, whatever that is. And when you think of your partner, your wife, you see them in a negative light, in a negative way. John Gottman, the marriage therapist and author, says contempt is one of the clearest indicators that divorce is in your future. They've actually done medical studies and found that when a spouse lives under or is an object of contempt, it leads to physical ailments. Here is a challenging question that we would sometimes ask in the marriage course that we would run. If I never ever met your partner and only had how you've described them or what you've spoken about them, how would I think of them? How would I see them? What would be my perception of them? And that's a pretty heavy thing, right? Because if you've never met my wife and because of what I've told you, you have a negative view of her, then you, whether you recognize it or not, have literally adopted a contemptuous attitude. So in contempt, negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions color how you see your wife. So we have cherish on the far left, then we have comparison, then criticism, and on the far right we have contempt. Now some of you are saying, wow, Vern, I'm really not glad that I listened to this podcast because I think that I have drifted a long way away from cherishing my wife. Let me just say, you're not alone. And I have had to learn some of this the hard way. If you have been through the Finding Traction course or one of the lessons, we talk about some of these concepts. And in this lesson, I describe my worst and most horrible Valentine's Day. And this is a true story. I think we'd been married, 6 or 7 years. And I thought that I was hitting it out of the park. Man, I thought I was just rocking it. And we hit Valentine's Day, and I could tell there was something wrong. Now, let me just say, my wife's love language is words of affirmation. And I don't know what had happened, or just a number of things had come together, or previous Valentine's Day, but we got to a point, and my wife let me have it. Well, I asked her what was wrong, and she honestly told me that I actually wasn't hitting it out of the park. I wasn't hitting a triple. I wasn't hitting a double. I wasn't even hitting a single. I was striking out. Why is that, you ask? Well, I am what I consider to be ESL. Now, that's not English as a second language. That is encouragement as a second language. You see, I never learned to speak the language of encouragement. I can't remember a single instant where my dad encouraged me. Or my mom did somewhat, but she was so preoccupied. But there was very little encouragement that I had growing up. As a result, it wasn't a language. I didn't have the vocabulary for it. So when I got married, I just didn't really do it, so it didn't really happen. And then my wife, who has words of affirmation as her number one love language, she described herself, I think the word, I'm just wilting. I am just wilting on the vine, or I'm just done. And so I just told her tough. That's just the way I am. Well, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. I actually said, you know what? This was the way I was raised, but I need to learn this new language. I need to go on, like when you learn a new language, what is that, Rosetta or something? I had better figure out if I want a happy wife and a happy life and a good marriage, I had better learn, to come up with new ways of talking, with a new vocabulary. So I took my best intentionality. I went down to an office supply store, and I remember sitting on the golf course, and I began to think through and write down all the things that I appreciated, that I noticed, that I loved, that I liked about my wife, thinking I had better start coming up with some handles so that I can actually begin to do that in a way. It's not just like somebody learning a new language. It's not going to come out perfectly, and it's not going to come out fluently, but it's a start. And I need to learn to make this a habit. And you know what? My wife was so appreciative of that. And she was, she didn't mock me for my accent or the fact that it felt stilted, but she truly loved the effort. Now, how am I today? Well, I think I should get a solid C+. Now, my wife's she's a natural encourager. She's off the charts as an encourager. So I have a great model to learn from. But I can learn to encourage her. Towards that, I can learn and I can grow in cherishing my wife. To quote Gary Thomas, he says this: cherishing is built and sustained by a lifetime of choices reaffirmed over decades, so that someone becomes increasingly important to us because of the choices we have made. And when I have begun to cherish my wife, it has changed the way I see her. You know what? There is those negative things. Well, what about this? Or that really bugs me, or all of that. And I can, in my type of critical nature, I could gravitate to all of those things that bug me or I wish were different. But I, by a force of habit, have learned to go, you know what? Those are just the negative results of all the things that I love about my wife. And so I did that. It's something I practiced. I mean, I literally wrote these things down, and then I kind of became a habit, and I didn't do it intentionally. I just kind of practiced that more. But recently, I was listening to this Gary Thomas podcast, and he really challenged me to pick this practice up again. So I've made a plan. Now, let me just say, there's a few of you who know me, and there's a few of you who know my wife, so you cannot breathe this to my wife. So in 2 days is going to be our 39th anniversary, and I went back to the store, Staples, which is our office supply store, and what I did is I bought a little kind of a diary scribbler, and this is what I'm going to do. I got this idea from Gary Thomas. I, once again, am going to each page write down one thing that I love, that I notice, that I appreciate, that I admire about my wife. And I'm going to do that. And I've got a note here. Every day I do that, it's the top of my list to write one new thing. And my goal, I know it's a big, hairy, audacious goal. My goal is on our 40th anniversary, which is a year and 2 days from now, that I can present that to her. 40 years of being together. In addition, I'm going to print out some pictures. There's us at the Dallas Cowboy game. There's us at Big Ben in London. There's us at a Colin James concert. There's us at different things that have been fun memories. So that is my goal. And I want to grow in my ability to cherish my wife. So let's go back to that opening hypothesis. What if those loving feelings towards our partner could actually propel us towards wanting to please them, wanting to protect them, wanting to nurture them? And in doing so, as those feelings begin to come alive again towards our partner, what if that actually could provide a guardrail for the next time we selfishly want to take care of our own needs at our wife's expense? All right, so there you go. There's the challenge. I want to leave that with you. Once again, I encourage you to reach out. If you want to get part of our group, reach out to me right away. Or you just want to talk about anything you're learning and how I can be of help in your recovery journey, send me an email. My email, once again, is bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.